So I uploaded a video recently where the host of Inside the NBA, Adam Lefko, was arguing that Luka Doncic was being overlooked for MVP consideration because of where the Mavericks were in the Western Conference standings, and Shaquille O'Neal has something a little bit different to say.
In the words of Shaq,
here you go asking questions.
He does it again. Answer, because they're currently the 7 seed.
That's not how I vote for MVP.
Yeah,
the MVP is SGA. He's one of few guys that have 50, 30-point games in the season.
Yeah. Now, as I was going through the comments on this video, or at least some of them, I noticed two different things. There was people who either strongly disagreed with the idea of Shai Gilgeous being MVP, or there was people who thought that Shaquille O'Neal had a bias against Luka Doncic or even Nikola Jokic because they were both white players. I'd like to address these thoughts and even more, so let's get into this right now. And let's say for argument's sake that what is being said about Shaq is true. The NBA handpicks media members from across the United States and Canada that consists of a panel of 100 people who vote for who they believe is the NBA's most valuable player. Now, the number stays the same, but the people can change. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that most of the people picked are probably not black. But regardless if they are or not, I don't believe they all agree with Shaq either. Either way, I don't see Luka Doncic or Nikola Jokic not getting an MVP because they're white. However, where there can be an issue, in my opinion, is the fact that we have media members who are not only shaping the narratives and storylines for us to see and hear every day, but also picking the MVPs. This is where I believe favoritism and other biases can go unchecked.
I have seen the MVP odds change in his direction after you sort of started to make your case. Jason Tatum's MVP case is over. It is not happening.
Let's look at Nikola Jokic. When you have a player averaging 26 points per game roughly and almost a triple-double, and that team is one of the best teams within their conference, of course that player should be an MVP consideration always. But let's look at Jason Tatum, because he's on a team that has the best record within the NBA period. And I believe if that's the case, there should always be a player from that team as well into consideration. Now, if we're comparing Nikola Jokic and Tatum's numbers, of course, Jokic looks a lot better. But what I've always valued about a guy like Jason Tatum is that he's a two-way player. So he could go ahead and lock down the opposing player on a team that's a star. If we remember in the 2022 NBA playoffs, and obviously Tatum wasn't guarding Durant the whole time, but he played a huge role in Durant not averaging over 40% field goal shooting and also over 5 turnovers during that series. Luka Doncic is another name that pops up in the MVP discussion. But I would point to the fact that only 3 players since 1975 have won MVP on a team that won less than 50 games. So I think for Doncic's case, the Dallas Mavericks have to win more in order for him to really have a chance to get an MVP. If you compare him to the 2017 OKC Thunder, then the Dallas Mavericks aren't too far off. As of the time that I made this video, they were hovering around 45 wins, as you see the Thunder at 47. And when you look at Luka Doncic's stats in comparison to Russell Westbrook, they're not far off either from the 2017 Russell Westbrook MVP year. And as I was saying before, the Mavericks are about 45 wins right now, and they're currently in the 5th seed as of April the 1st when I was making this video. As we know with this current Dallas Mavericks team, they rely heavily on Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving for offense. Now, I will say with guys like Gafford and Lively, because they're so good at finishing around the rim, easy layups or dunks, it's essential that they're using pick and rolls and they help Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving out when teams blitz them or try to stop them on the perimeter. It also helps that you got a guy like Tim Hardaway coming off the bench. But for the most part, it's really Luka Doncic and then Kyrie Irving assisting. Let me make the case for SGA and why he could win MVP. I think one of the biggest things that stands out to me is the fact that OKC Thunder were a 40-42 win team last year, barely in the play-in game, and now they're number 1 in the Western Conference at 52 wins currently. Of course, having Chet Holmgren helps, but he's a rookie, and for the most part, it's SGA. A lot of people talk about his 30-point games, 50 times he scored it, but his defense is overlooked. This guy's a really, really good defensive player, and this needs to be talked about more. Similar to what I was saying with Jason Tatum earlier. SGA leads the league in total steals and steals per game. Now, one person who really got taken out of the mix due to injury, unfortunately, was Joel Embiid. As you see looking at his numbers, it's very monstrous. And the 76ers were 29-16 before he got injured and were 3rd in the East.
I got to admit to you, it's a battle for number 3 between Anthony Edwards and Jalen Brunson.
I actually agree with Stephen A for the most part, or at least to have them in the MVP conversation, because the New York Knicks and the Timberwolves have had a lot of their main players injured, and these two guys have helped them to stay afloat. With the Knicks, as you know, OG Anunoby and Julius Randle being injured, and on the Timberwolves team, they had injuries to Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. And last but certainly not least, you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's still putting up crazy numbers and keeping the Milwaukee Bucks at the top of the Eastern Conference. He should be mentioned as well with all the other names that were talked about. Thanks for watching, and if there's anyone that I may have missed that you think deserves to be in this conversation, go ahead and let me know in the comments.